Okay, so looking at indirect taxation, this is obviously a government intervention here to deal with our market failure problems. So we need to be able to evaluate the impact of indirect taxes and discuss the effectiveness. Are they effective? How do they work? Those types of things. So remember, we're looking at indirect taxation, so it's a tax on a specific product to discourage consumption of a particular good or service. So this is your indirect tax diagram. We have two supply curves with supply moving inwards. And here is why supply moves inwards, because what it does is it increases the cost of production. So it shifts supply inwards as firms can now make less with the resources they have. This puts upwards pressure on the price. Oh, it should be price, not price level, sorry. This causes a movement along the demand curve and the equilibrium quantity is reduced. And that's what we're trying to do, really, because when we're looking at indirect taxes, we're trying to solve this problem of overproduction, overconsumption. So we're thinking about negative externalities and we're thinking about demerit goods. Okay, so this is a complex diagram. You don't actually need to know this for your exam, but it's just kind of interesting. So when we apply a tax, not all of it is passed on to the consumer. You can see this amount here. This is the burden on the consumer because that's the increase in the price there. But some of it is actually borne by the producer. So this producer's had this indirect tax applied to them. Not only are they losing the quantity demanded has decreased from there to there, but actually they're having to, their costs have increased as well. So probably some supplies leave the market. That's why we've got the supply moving inwards. Oops. Okay, so you need to talk about how it works. So we've done that, but you also need to know the benefits and the disadvantages. So first benefit is economists love it because it uses the market mechanism, and by that we mean it uses the forces of demand and supply. And economists believe that people respond best to incentives. Okay, so that's it's using this market system to correct market failure. It also raises a bit of revenue for the government. So either way you look at it, that shaded box, the burden on the consumer plus the burden on the producer, that's money for the government. That's their tax revenue. And it also, lastly, it follows the polluter pays principle. So the person, the company, the business that's polluting, who's creating this external cost, has to have the indirect tax applied to them, and they're paying for this problem. So if you get your indirect tax the same amount as the external cost, then it's sort of transferring that cost onto the polluter. So it's a nice phrase coming up here. It is internalizing the external cost. So that's why economists like this method. But there are problems with indirect taxes. So it can make firms internationally uncompetitive. So taxes are set by governments, taxes are set nationally usually, and therefore it doesn't mean just because one country set one doesn't mean another country is going to set them. So when you're looking at, applying a tax, you need to know that you're increasing the cost for your firms in that country, so you're making their products, their price increase. And so when they're trading in a competitive market, in an internationally competitive market, which we trade in these days because of globalization, then that's making your firms a bit uncompetitive. So it has macro implications on your trade balance. It's also hard to determine the correct level of tax to cover the external cost of the activity. Now, unfortunately, external costs and negative externalities, these external costs tend to be things that aren't traded on a market. So it tends to be like water pollution or air pollution or noise pollution or all these types of pollution. Now, you don't go into a shop and say, can I have 1 unit of pollution, please? Or can I have a unit of dirty air? Or not unless you're quite unusual. So if they're not things that are traded, it means they don't have a market price. So actually trying to come up with a tax that's monetary based for something that isn't monetary based and finding the right level is going to be difficult, and you deal with that in your A2 course a little bit more. But if you apply too large a tax, then you're going to have underproduction. If you apply too small a tax, you're going to have still have overproduction. So that's going to be a problem. The burden of the tax may be absorbed by the producer, we can see that PED has an impact on how much is absorbed by the producer and the consumer, but also PES has an impact on how much is absorbed by the producer and the consumer as well. You know, is it going to move, you know, is it going to cause a big enough movement along the demand curve? You know, if the price isn't altered, then maybe not. Depends on what level you're trying to get it to. And the effectiveness also depends upon PED. So I've got two nice diagrams here, so we can see elastic demand and inelastic demand here, and we've got the same, oh, it should be the same size as tax actually. I think this one of these taxes is a little bit bigger, but you can see here what we're looking at is down here. We're not too bothered about the price actually, we're just looking at down here for how much we've been able to move the quantity. So we've applied a tax here and we've moved the quantity a lot more than we've actually increased the price by, but that's fine because what we want to do is move the quantity. Here it's actually a larger tax, I think. Is it the same tax? No, it's a larger tax, and we've been able to move the price quite a bit, but that's not the objective. The objective is to try and reduce the quantity by a bit more. So you'd have to move as much as the diagram on the left, you'd have to have a much larger tax applied to the diagram on the right. So when you have elastic demand, your indirect tax works a lot better than when you have inelastic demand. So you have to think about, is this product elastic or inelastic? So you'd have to think about, well, does it have many substitutes, and what is the time frame that we're looking at here, and those factors. Okay, so evaluate the impact. That's really looking at the pros and the cons and the effectiveness of these policies. So if you want to get top marks in the exam, I'll just skip a little bit ahead. So this is your kind of framework for your essay. Level 1 is looking at your definitions. So this was an essay question a few years ago, I think. Oh, actually, it might have been last year, summer 2014. So definitions in there, you'd want to put down what indirect taxation is, maybe what market failure is, and what negative externalities are. Level 2 to level 3. So level 1's just 1 to 4 marks. Level 2 is 5 to 8 marks. Level 3 is 9 to 12 marks. Now the difference between level 2 and level 3 is, are you explaining? So level 2 is just stating cause and effect, stating that an indirect tax will shift supply inwards. It will reduce the equilibrium quantity. Level 3 is more why. Why does that happen? And really explaining any of the benefits that you get there. So you can get up to 12 marks by explaining that diagram, explaining how it works. Level 4 is the evaluation. It's really explaining the negatives or explain the other side of the story. So what are the negatives that are going to happen? And then EE is your extended or effective or extended evaluation. So what does it depend upon? So we could bring in PED there. We could say, well, yeah, this indirect tax would be really effective if PED is elastic, but if it's inelastic, then it's going to be less effective, or you're going to need quite a large tax to deal with it and those types of things. But you can also get this, it's probably an easier way of getting these marks, is by talking about the alternatives to an indirect tax. So alternatives, well, we could use regulation, and this isn't affected. A positive of regulation is it doesn't depend upon PED, the effectiveness. But big negative now, it raises no revenue for the government. Another alternative would be tradable permits, and a benefit of using this is that it provides an incentive for cleaner producers. So not only does it kind of punish the polluters, the polluter pays principle, but it also kind of incentivizes cleaner producers or producers just to be cleaner anyway. But unfortunately, it doesn't raise any revenue for the government. So, you know, you could make up your own mind about, well, which one is better based on the case study, of course, and that should enable you to get the full 18 marks.